towns are not small versions of urban cities. Major challenges include connecting residents far and wide to the internet, affordable housing, transportation, and jobs. Even though many towns face challenges to stay vibrant and desirable, they have great opportunities for the young and old alike. To make their towns even more attractive, municipalities are offering incentives to bring in new residents. Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Atkinson, and welcome to this month's edition of Rural America Live with AARP. Well, tonight we want to hear from you. What makes your town great? What do you think What do you think? Let me get my words out of my mouth here this evening.
Oh, you're doing great.
What do you think can make your town even better? Is affordable housing an issue? How about access to health care? Of course, we want you to join our conversation this evening. The phone lines are open. Just give us a call. That's 877-283-7570. Now, we have a couple of questions this month. What is your community doing right? And how can your community be better? And we are giving away coolers tonight. We want you to join our conversation. Give us a call at 877-283-7570. And you don't need to be a member of AARP or over 50. Now, as a reminder, you can win only once each calendar year. And for those who win one of these great coolers this evening, we want to let you know that AARP will call you back using the number that you called us from. Of course, it won't be tonight, but they'll give you a call in the next few days to confirm your mailing address. And if you're a past winner and you've not yet received your cooler, well, be sure to return their call and provide a shipping address. Well, joining me now is Greg Marshallton, State Director for AARP Vermont, and Brad Anderson, State Director for AARP Iowa. And gentlemen, as always, thank you very much for taking the time to join us here this evening. Great to see you again.
Great to be back.
So let's go ahead and just jump on in. During the last couple of years, people have been relocating, moving out of some of these urban places and working somewhat more remotely if it's possible. Something that definitely seems to be a trend right now.
Yeah, well, as our friend in Oklahoma, Sean Voskuil, says, the AARP State Director in Oklahoma, the people are moving. And he's right, the people are moving. And, you know, as we've seen in the pandemic, it kind of makes sense because basically right now, if you have a computer, if you have an internet connection, you can live just about anywhere for a lot of people, whether it's you want to stay connected in retirement or you've got a job that maybe you can telework. So the people are moving, and for the last 45 years, United Van Lines, the moving company, has done a great job tracking this data. And so they tell you exactly where people are going, and they also tell you why they're going there. And so I want to take a look at some of this data because it's really interesting. And first focus on the where. And so where they are going, what state has the most inbound migration? Well, Greg,
Look at that, everybody.
the great state of Vermont. The great state of Vermont has the most inbound migration at 74%. Now, where are they leaving? Well, New Jersey, for 4 years in a row, is the state with the greatest amount of outward migration. So they've got 71% outbound migration. And so that's where they're leaving, 71%. And
Holy cow.
But you can kind of understand why. I mean, if you're if you're in New Jersey and you can imagine you're stuck in traffic, it's a little smoggy outside, and you're kind of fed up with the hustle and bustle. Maybe you saw an episode of Newhart last night. You're like, well, Vermont's not a bad idea, right? And so maybe you're going to head to Vermont. But now there's so much change. There's so many changes, and everyone has become so much more mobile that they have these options. And so they are moving. Sean is right. But also why? So why are they? And this is where the data gets really interesting.
Okay.
So United Van Lines has tracked this data. And the why is, number one, is 31.8%, about 32%, say they want to be closer to family. Well, 32.5% said they're moving because of a job or a transfer. But compare that to 2015. I mean, this is fascinating because in 2015, 60% of people moved for a job. And so what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that jobs are not driving relocation. Right now, it's amenities, it's small town amenities. It's being close to family. And so those communities that are addressing those amenities, which we're going to talk about, are really doing something right. And so what I really want to know is from our callers, actually, because you had mentioned callers. Are there callers out there who have moved from an urban community into a small town? Maybe do you have a relative that has moved closer to you in a small town from a big city? Call us and let us know your story, because we're really interested in hearing from you, and you may have a chance to win one of our famous coolers if you do call. So give us a buzz.
Well, of course, as we continue moving on, we know that keeping our communities vibrant and desirable is a concern for AARP. That's because many older Americans they want to live in their own home. They want to live in their own home community.
Yep. Well, we know that transportation is a huge concern for most rural communities.
Absolutely.
There's just very little way for people to get around if you don't drive. So for folks that cannot drive, have decided not to drive, or cannot drive for some reason, this is a very challenging and huge issue. So, people need to do these things. They need to go visit family and friends. They need to go to the doctor. They need to go to the grocery store. And in many rural communities, this is a huge, huge challenge. So we're seeing, as Brad was talking about, some of these places really focused on amenities. Those amenities include things like sidewalks. Walkability is really important. Not only is it good for your health, but if you can walk to the store and walk to a friend's house or go to the park, that makes a huge difference in your quality of life. But a lot of these communities are confronting some significant problems. And we've been working on some pilot programs across the country, trying to get a little bit more centered and a little bit more insight into how we might be able to figure out how to deal with some of this connectivity and some of the work that's been happening. We have one very exciting program going on in Oregon right now called Ride Sheet. And that helps folks get to and from the grocery store, to and from the doctor, to and from a family's friend's house by making appointments. So Ride Sheet's a pretty simple thing. It's an internet tool, like you might use an internet to sign up to go to a movie or something like that. And AARP Oregon took this program to a very, very rural part of eastern Oregon, which very few people live in, and we decided to pilot this to see what it worked, and I think we should have a look at this. It's very interesting stuff.
All right.
I actually got into this because when we first moved here, I was having some engine problems with my vehicle, and we found out about this program, and they take me to town to go shopping, the doctor's appointments, take me into as far as Bend, which is like 100 miles one way.
Living in a rural community has many positive attributes. Yet 15% of the population living there include some of the oldest and sickest people in the country. Finding a ride to the doctor is often part of the problem. That's why AARP is piloting a new ride scheduling technology in Lake County, Oregon, called Ride Sheet, and according to AARP's latest report, could be a game changer.
Ride Sheet is a very simple yet innovative way that takes the Google suite of software in the cloud, and it combines that with a standardized way of formatting trip data, which really allows them to provide more efficient service to everyone in the community.
In rural areas, there is no public transit, no taxi, Uber, or Lyft. Non-drivers, many of whom are older and may have a disability, depend on volunteer drivers or human service agencies to meet their needs.
Ride Sheet allows these nonprofit providers to schedule trips, share trip runs, have a good record of the service that they're providing. That, in turn, allows them to provide much more efficient and better service to the community.
I think it's impacting older people's lives here in a big way. I personally think part of my job is to keep an eye on elderly people in the town that I pick up and transport. A lot of them don't have people looking in on them. So it's important, I think, to have a service like this where people who do live alone and are elderly can still stay independent and get around, but still have their space in their own home.
Well, that certainly seems like a great program that you guys, from what you were saying, kind of helped get started, spearhead.
Well, yeah, I mean, these community grant programs, which Brad will talking about in a few minutes, but you can see, I mean, this guy talked about, the closest grocery store being 100 miles away, a doctor being 100 miles away. And for older people who elect not to drive because it becomes a more difficult thing to do, perhaps more dangerous, rural transportation issues are significant. So funding this kind of program way out there in Eastern Oregon has allowed us to collect some data. interview the riders, interview the volunteer drivers, and figure out how it works. And what we hope after that is that the community embraces a program like this and figures how to sustain it. So
it seems like
we'll
pretty
see.
solid feedback from that one so
It's
far.
really good so far, and it's a very exciting opportunity because, you know, if you live in Nashville like people do around here, or you live in a big city and you got a smartphone, you can get an Uber in a second. But if you live in a rural part of really any state in this country, you're not going to be able to get a ride that way.
All right, well, we're going to continue the conversation. Again, you can give us a call. We'd love for you to join the conversation here this evening. Do you have something that your community has done that you'd like to maybe share, maybe spur some ideas for some other folks across the countryside? Or would you like to just inquire and ask some questions? Well, we want to hear from you. You can give us a call, 877-283-7570. Remember, we have 5 coolers to give away tonight. The phone lines are open. Tell us what makes your town special. You might have an idea that sparks some other ideas, gets folks into action. Again, that number 877-283-7570 to join the conversation.
When you can't hear well, it's not just frustrating, it can be alienating. Here are 3 surprising things you can do to prevent hearing loss. Avoid smoking. Studies have shown that smokers are more likely to have high-frequency hearing loss than non-smokers. The number of cigarettes matters too. Studies show that smoking up to 10 cigarettes a day makes hearing loss 40% more likely. More than 10 a day raises the risk to 60%. Certain over-the-counter medications such as ibuprofen, acetaminophen, and aspirin can also hurt your hearing. These ototoxic medications, a term that literally means poison for the ears, can be risky for older adults. Stay away from foods with high sugar, salt, and saturated fats. Studies show that diets rich in fruits and vegetables, folic acid, and potassium can decrease the risk of hearing loss. If you notice a sudden change in your hearing, make sure to contact your doctor. For more health tips, go to aarp.org/health.
And welcome back. We're taking calls and answering your questions tonight. And to help us do that are Greg Marshallton, Director for AARP Vermont, and Brad Anderson, AARP Iowa State Director. Now, we are giving away 5 coolers to 5 lucky callers tonight, and we want you to join in on the conversation, so give us a call, 877-283-7570. Again, we have 5 Yeti coolers to give away. We're at the front end of summer, so there's no better time to have a cooler stocked away and ready to go when you hit the water. Now, before we jump right on in, we were talking about that little piece from AARP, talking about those little tidbits about hearing loss, and we were commenting those were all 3 fresh new facts for us.
Yeah. I got to say, there were 2 things I learned that I had no idea just watching that, and one of which, the ibuprofen one, the medicine. You know, my dad's experienced some hearing loss, and I'm going to let him know, you got to take it easy on the Advil, man.
Dad, listen up.
Impact.
Listen up. And he says, huh? What?
Exactly.
So, well, Brad, we are going to go back to the phone lines, of course, but before we do, we alluded to this a while ago, the AARP Community Challenge. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so the AARP Community Challenge grants are some of my favorite things that we do at AARP, and the Oregon Transportation Project that Greg was talking about is a great example of that. So they're smaller, quick action grants that we fund every year across the country. And they're really meant to make communities more livable for people of all ages. So we like to say 8 to 80, for example. And we'll see some examples. I just have to share one of my favorite examples. So I'm the state director of Iowa, and a couple years ago, the community of Keokuk, which is, we like to call the Key West of Iowa. So that's down in southeast Iowa. It's that little corner down there.
There you go.
And they applied for a grant to build a new pickleball court. And so what they did, it was really interesting. What they did was they took a crumbling tennis court and got a community challenge grant from AARP, and that leveraged some additional funds, and they created this world-class pickleball court. And it's become a destination for pickleballers in the region. So from Fort Madison all the way over to Illinois, people come now to Keokuk, and Keokuk has made their community more livable, and it was in part, not only because, but in part because of the AARP Challenge Grant. So it's a great example of how you can attract people from urban communities, you know, if you're a small town looking to do that. So, but I want to take a look at some of our 2021 winners. So we've got some terrific community gardens. In Bowman, North Dakota, give a shout out to Bowman there. They've got one. You can see those. In Hudson, New Hampshire, and in Kenai, Alaska, where I know Greg has spent some time. So we've got some terrific community gardens, and there are a lot of states that fund community garden projects, and these are always a big hit. And then we've got my favorite, actually, one of my favorites are park benches. And so this is a Have a Seat program, and so we've got benches in Belen, Wisconsin, Sandpoint, Idaho, and Hot Springs, Arkansas. And the reason I love benches so much is I cannot think of anything more age-friendly, we use that term a lot, than a bench. Because if you're a kid and you've been playing a lot and you're tired, you sit on that bench. If you're a mom watching that kid, you sit on the bench. If you're a grandparent and you're going on a stroll and you want to take a break, you sit on that bench. So benches are great for all ages. They're pretty simple to do. And we find a lot of benches at ARP, and we're proud of it. It really does, it really can transform a community. So, you know, again, I'd like to put out a call from your callers, because Greg and I are here. And if you do have an idea for a community challenge grant, let us know. Give us a call right now, and you may even win one of those coolers. But we always love to hear innovative ideas from smaller towns, especially because it's those smaller towns. We had Avoca, Iowa, is another, and I'm all these examples, but Avoca, Iowa had, they put in an application for an outdoor music park right on the town square. Yeah. And it's been there for years, and kids and adults of all ages play it. And so it's just an amazing project. So give us a call and share some of your projects. On that note, I'm going to give a little shout out to a community that I lived in once upon a time, Clay Center, Kansas. They have an outdoor park and kind of a nice little stage and a sounding area that could use a little renovation. So guys in Clay Center, Kansas, and other towns with that sort of thing, what a great little feature, because they do during the summer have weekly band performances from local community members. Sounds like a perfect spot. It does. It sounds like a great idea, and you love to get out during the summertime. Now remember, give us a call, 877-283-7570. That is the number to call to join in on the conversation this evening. As he said, we'd love to hear some ideas that you've been using in your own hometown community, or just an idea that maybe you'd like to see take off somewhere. Now we have somebody on the line with us. With that, we're going to go to West Virginia, and we have Michael on the line from West Virginia. And first of all, Michael, congratulations. You are our first winner this evening of one of those 5 Yeti coolers. So congratulations on that front. Michael, go ahead with your thoughts, your questions, or your idea that you'd like to share.
Yes, good evening, and thank you very much. I am in my mid-40s, and I recently moved back after approximately 18 years of traveling, living in the cities, everything in that nature. But as I move back, I see people moving away, children not participating in what I participated in as a youth. And I would just like to urge town councils, maybe city mayors, or whoever to maybe a 1 or 2 acre plot of forestry or gardening or a couple acres of farming, and involve the youth and get them hands-on starting at maybe age 5 to 18, and hopefully keep the people in their communities and in their areas.
Great idea.
Yeah, but I think Michael is on to something. I mean, one of the things he said is, you know, can we create some open space? Can we create some parks? We know that the reason why people are returning, sort of leaving some places and moving to others, we certainly see this in Vermont, you know, what Brad was talking about earlier, is that public space is really important, right? Parks are really important. Places for people to go, people to gather, people to be with other folks. Those things are attractive. And I think as we're all sort of figuring our way through a post-COVID world, some of these smaller communities really have huge opportunities to look at areas around public spaces, around parks, around walkability, around biking, around all sort of stuff that sort of brings people together and offers a variety of things for people to do without sort of the hassles that come along with it in big cities, with the traffic and the heat, crime, whatever else it might be. Right. So you gotta have people like Michael out there sort of encouraging their communities to think about these sorts of things. One of the things we've also learned, and Brad knows a lot about this from the work he does in Iowa as well, is that your local politicians, your town councils, your town managers, your mayors are accessible in the way that your members of Congress may not be. Right. These are approachable people who live in your communities. Go up to them, provide an idea, let them know what you think, because it's likely that they might listen to you. You know,
You're so right about accessibility. And so there's another community I was thinking of when you were saying that is Charles City, Iowa. And years ago, the former mayor, Jim Aarp, heard something from a member of the community saying, why don't we tear out this Lowhead Dam, build a whitewater course, essentially, through towns. It's a small town of about 7,500 up in northeast Iowa. And he took the giant leap, right? And he was one of the first communities to do it. Now it's become a thing, of course, to tear down these dams. Well, it's also an economic development tool for these communities when they do that, because since he did that and created that water course, Charles City is now a destination, and they did an economic development study, $650,000 a year in economic development alone, and the whole project took $700,000. So in their first year, they made it all back.
Right.
And the nice thing about it is maybe everyone can't sit there and get in the water and do the rapids, but older folks, what they do is they've got benches all around, the park is really accessible, and that creates a livable community so they can watch their kids, they can watch their grandkids. But it is also, if you're living in a big city right now and you're thinking like we're talking about today, you're thinking about, I don't like the hustle and bustle, I want to move somewhere, but I also want some of these amenities. Projects like that are a great example of how to do that.
Absolutely. Great ideas there. Well, again, our phone lines are open. Give us a call. 877-283-7570 is the number. And again, we also have those Yeti coolers to give away, so we'd love for you to take one of those home. Now, with that, we go back to the phone lines, and we have Pat from Texas on the line with us. Pat, go ahead with your question or your comment, or we hope you have a big idea, too.
Hello?
There you are, Pat. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'd like to find out how I go about getting the people around here to understand we need industry in this small town to keep our kids from moving away when they graduate from high school. There's no industries, there's no manufacturers, there's only service jobs in fast food stores or hospitality in hotels or service stations. We cater mainly to people that come here to visit our lakes, and I say lakes plural because we're surrounded by many huge lakes, and we have fishing tournaments all summer long and sometimes in the winter and the summer. But we've got all these indigenous people that come around for camping and fishing, and they leave after a little while, and we're left to pick up the pieces in the trash and go back to doing without, because there's nothing for our kids to do here.
Yeah. I mean, I think Brad and I hear a lot about this too, and I think this is not an uncommon struggle, which is small communities, maybe not a lot of opportunity, but that's what livable communities really are all about. So we would say to Pat and to her community, start thinking about those lakes perhaps in a different way. Instead of looking at them purely about tourist dollars, think about how you're going to be able to use that natural beauty of where she's talking about in Texas to make things better for the folks in that local community. So that may mean adding some kind of a paved bike route around one of those lakes, more accessibility, more ways for people, again, as Brad was saying earlier, from 8 to 80 to sort of contribute. So there's sort of two dynamics here, but again, what we're seeing is a greater desire for people to leave the intensity of big urban centers, big ex-urban centers, and move to places that offer things like lakes and mountains and beauty. But then it becomes incumbent upon the towns themselves not just to think about it purely as an economic development issue, which it is, but how do we make this better for our teenagers? How do we make this better for our kids? How do we make this better for our parents and grandparents? And if you've got some of those, what we sort of talk about as bones in those communities, the lakes are a very good example, how do you make that work so that it's a value for people coming into the community, but it's also a high value for folks that live there? If you have anything to add to that.
I do. And first of all, I want to know where these fishing tournaments are because I'm
ready to go.
I'm ready to compete. But secondly, Greg's absolutely right. So it sounds like where Pat lives is a great destination.
Yeah.
but it also sounds like there's some opportunities there. And what she's talking about essentially is jobs, right? She's saying, how do I bring jobs to my community? Well, I think maybe rethinking what she means by industry would be one approach. And one example of this is what they're doing in Jefferson, Iowa, which Jefferson, Iowa is west of Des Moines. It's a small town. And they said, okay, here's what we want to do. We now live in a mobile community. We want to attract workers from big cities into our town. And what we're going to do and how we're going to do that is we're going to build a co-working space. And so we're going to give them somewhere to work if they want or have meetings or whatever. And we're going to give them that for free if they move to Jefferson. So they give it to them for free, and it's this great incentive. And what that means is because people can work now anywhere, there are people, and so they're giving them this amenity, and now they're coming to Jefferson. And that's exactly what Pat wanted, right? Pat wanted people to come there and not just end up leaving, but actually live there and create a community. And so maybe rethinking what we think of as industry is one approach.
Now, let's say I've got a great idea. Who do I need to approach about this? Who do we turn to that can help make this happen?
Well, I mean, there's several places you can go, but we would recommend you come talk to us. So AARP has offices in all 50 states. We all participate in this Community Challenge program, which frankly gives millions of dollars in grants away a year. Not millions to an individual grant, but millions of dollars in small grants all across the country. So you can contact your AARP offices in states. They can help you come up with these ideas. But again, as I said earlier, you can talk to your elected officials. In small towns and in rural towns, you know these people. They're your neighbors. You see them at the grocery store, you see them on the street. Talk about this kind of stuff because this sort of co-working space idea that's in Jefferson, Iowa that Brad was just talking about, that's a very simple idea, right? Some money up front to maybe create that space. But for people that are looking to get out and are looking for this kind of a lifestyle, you got to provide some different amenities to bring them in and keep them. So again, I think, come to us because we got a ton of ideas about how to do this. Certainly I do, and certainly Brad does, and our colleagues across the country. But again, reach out to your local elected officials because they're looking for ideas. And if you can provide them, they'll start thinking, okay, maybe we can get this done. And AARP has, I don't know, Brad, hundreds at this point, maybe even thousands of examples of these programs that we have sponsored all across the country, and you can get a flavor of those as well.
Well, I like the idea of approaching the state AARP because then you've had a conversation with somebody who's already been there, and then you can also use that as an extra backing whenever you approach your local elected officials as well too. So continuing the conversation here this evening, would love to hear from you. 877-283-7570 is the number to call. Give us a call this evening. Let us know what's going on in your own local community or ask a question if you'd like. Now, with that, we go back to the phone lines. We have RUTHANNE from Florida on the line with us today. And RUTHANNE is one of our winners of one of our coolers here this evening. So congratulations, RUTHANNE. Go ahead with your question or your comment or your great idea.
Hey, that's great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So yes, I'm not in a rural community in Florida. I'm in St. Petersburg, but just had some comments. I come from a rural community in Spain, just outside of Bilbao, in the north of Spain, and the infrastructures are very different in these rural communities. But long before COVID hit, they've been delivering groceries to the elderly and the disabled for as long as I can remember. And also they have transportation set up for people. So I love the idea that you're all working with the transportation for people because it really is, vital that these folks can get to where they need to go. But the other comment I wanted to make is in the small towns, they connect them with red trails. They're called red trails. So they create these long, expansive red trails. They're painted red, town to town, and they end up being very vital walking paths for people, cycling paths for people, getting people from town to town. And it does actually create a lot of revenue because you have people coming from the cities to get out into the countries, into the rural areas. So that's the comment I wanted to make, just an idea to create revenue and get people healthier, and also more infrastructure for the elderly to have access to things.
I love what RUTHANNE was talking about there because there was a time in Iowa where bike trails were somewhat controversial because, of course, you've got some eminent domain issues. And that was about 15 or 20 years ago. Now we are defined by our bike trails. I mean, we have these world-class bike trails throughout the entire state, and they are a true gem. And what I love most is they are truly age-friendly. So you ride on these bike trails, and you see people of all ages. You see kids, you see parents pulling kids, and you see older folks. But what they have done is exactly what Ruthanne is talking about. They have changed some of the small towns that they're going through, because now what happens is you get a pack of riders, and through the summer you go to a bar. We go to bars in Iowa when we ride bikes. And then you go there, you have a meal, then you go to the next town, and you do it all over again. And it becomes a tradition, that you do every weekend essentially. And it helps the community. It helps build that sense of community. It helps connect people, frankly, from urban areas to some of these smaller communities. And then they're like, oh man, I might come here to live one day. Who knows? So great point, Ruthanne.
Nice, peaceful place to spend the evening, spend your life.
There you go.
All right, well, we're going to continue the conversation. Again, give us a call, 877-283-7570. And with that, we go back to the phone lines, and we have Tim from Iowa on the line with us here.
Tim.
Go ahead with your question or comment. Kim?
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I appreciate that. What I'm wanting to double back on is the West Virginia gentleman, the caller. He talked about public spaces, about open spaces, and I would like to just wonder whether or not AARP has done anything about creating public open spaces where people can discuss tough issues together. Things like changing community dynamics, things like immigration, issues about what's happening with schools in rural areas, things that would be called maybe wicked issues. So I'm wondering whether or not AARP is doing anything with that.
Gentlemen?
Well, I'll take this since it's Iowa. Right?
Give that one to you.
So one of the things that we love to do at ARP, of course, is foster these community conversations. And I will say, Kim, that if you do want to have these conversations, please go to aarp.org/IA, and you will find events that ARP is hosting. And we would love to get your feedback, frankly. And we do this, of course, like Greg was saying, we do it with small town officials. We do it with federal elected officials. We do it with state elected officials. And so we do host these meetings. Now, I think what you're asking about is, have we actually built something to host these events? I think that's what you were asking about. The answer to that is no, not in Iowa, but you have a good idea. And so what I would do is encourage you to maybe reach out to some members of the community, approach an elected official, and frankly, apply for a challenge grant. I mean, if it's something that would further create a sense of community, make your community more livable, and engage the public in something that is issue oriented, and we would love to consider that. So again, one thing I want to point out is our challenge grants are coming. They are going to be announced on June 29th. And so for folks who are interested, like Kim or others, in kind of learning more about that process and what we're funding out there and what some communities are dreaming up, follow AARP and follow your state office and see what they announce on June 29th, and I think you'll get some great ideas.
Will they also be the chance to maybe look at some of the past winners and get some ideas for their own local area?
You bet. Yeah, we've got websites for that as well.
Wonderful. Yep. Well, we are continuing the conversation, and again, we have those coolers we are giving away this evening. 877-283-7570 is the number to call to join in the conversation. And Kim from Iowa, thank you very much for your call. Now we turn to Texas, and we have Kathy on the line from the Lone Star State. Kathy, congratulations. You are a winner of one of those coolers here this evening as well, too. Go ahead, Kathy, with your thoughts.
Yes, I was just wondering, as I am getting ready to retire here in the next year or two, the issues surrounding senior citizens and health care and things such as that have become on my forefront of my mind. And I was just wondering what was the best way to advocate for change or for priorities, legislative wise, what is the best way for me as an individual to advocate? Is that to join the AARP state office, or are there other avenues, letter writing, meeting with those officials? And I know that you just mentioned meeting with an official, with Kim from Iowa, but wanting to really go even farther than that.
Well, we would highly recommend you call our good friends at the AARP Texas office. We have offices, I believe, in Austin, and there's one in Houston, and there's one in Dallas, with a tremendous staff and really hundreds of volunteers all across that state. So if you're interested in things like healthcare and affordability, and is there enough broadband connection in your rural communities, AARP in Texas is working on all those issues. And you can certainly go look at their stuff on their website at aarp.org/TX. But I think, you're also talking about what you can do as an individual. I think that what's most exciting when you start looking at these smaller communities, these more rural communities, is that an individual can have an impact. A single individual can raise a good idea in small communities that can be taken seriously by elected officials. You can go to your next door neighbor or to your friends and bring them together for a house party and talk about your idea and to try to generate some support. I think, making change at the federal level is important, and AARP advocates for things like Social Security and Medicare and those sorts of things at the national level. But I think people's voices at the local level are louder, and they're heard more. So I would encourage you again to contact our good friends at AARP Texas, but also to not be bashful. Go sit down with your elected officials, bring your friends together, and talk about making change, and then bring that to the people that you've elected to make that change.
Yeah, and can I just add one thing to that?
Sure.
Because just yesterday, the governor of Iowa signed into law a bill to make elder abuse a crime for the first time in the state of Iowa.
Wow.
And this passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate, and signed into law by the governor. And it would not have happened without our AARP volunteers. The bill just wouldn't have happened because we worked on this bill for 4 years, and we asked our volunteers day after day to contact their local legislators, who odds are they've met in a coffee or they live nearby. And in doing so, they kept it on the front burner. And just yesterday, and that's why I'm so pumped up about it, because just yesterday it was signed into law by the government. It's a very big deal. And elder abuse is now a crime in Iowa, and it's because of the people who helped us out along the way.
Congratulations.
So we're grateful.
That's great news, Brad.
It's definitely moving mountains there.
That's right.
Very slowly, but it is
Takes
happening.
time.
Yes.
So, Kathy, thank you very much for your call. Again, that was Kathy from Texas, and you mentioned not being bashful. I don't think Kathy is. I think
No, she doesn't sound bashful.
She's got a lot of potential there. Well, with that, we continue on. Now, Greg, how can we find out how our own town or our own city maybe measures up whenever we're talking about some of these things, when it comes to just even getting around jobs, also healthcare? We know healthcare is key.
Well, at aarp.org, we have this very cool feature on our website where you can simply enter your zip code, and that's going to tell you sort of how your area or community sort of measures up to others. Is it walkable enough? Is there public transportation available? Are there good health services close? And there's other items, including things like housing and job opportunities. We call it our livability index, and it's a really important tool. And you can find it at aarp.org/AARP Live right now. You can see it up on your screen. So it gives people an opportunity, again, who are looking to move to smaller, more rural communities, an opportunity to see what's already available and what isn't. It's also an opportunity for folks in those communities that live there already to say, boy, we're doing pretty well with affordable housing right now, but we have no transportation.
Right.
So it can give people ideas about what those needs are so that you can take those to local elected officials and try to make change. But this livability index is a very, very comprehensive database. Again, just plug in your zip code and you'll learn a lot about what's available in your local communities through this website.
Kind of give you something to set some goals for there.
That's
also.
right. That's right.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Well, we are going to continue the conversation. Stay with us, and we also still want you to join the conversation. We have 2 coolers left to give away, so give us a call at the number on your screen. That's 877-283-7570. You just might be a winner. And welcome back. We have callers waiting for us, and we do still have 2 coolers to give away. So with that, let's go straight to the phone lines. Now we have Frank from Iowa on the phone with us here this evening. And Frank, congratulations. You are taking home one of those last 2 coolers we have available. So congratulations. And now go ahead with your question or comment.
Well, thank you very much for the cooler. I really appreciate that.
Great coolers, Frank.
Yeah.
My comment tonight, they're cool coolers, huh?
They are.
My comment tonight is in response to the woman from Texas a couple of times ago that wants to keep her youth in town, and we just need more industry. In rural America today, the strategic advantage that rural communities have, specifically with the elderly, is to create entrepreneurship and to create an entrepreneurship ecosystem that helps the youth have their opportunity that they can come back. They can open their own business, and then with the older population, they have a lot of experience that they can teach to the youth and mentor them in their own business, or even give a second career for the older population of that community, as that's most likely the largest segment, the largest demographic that is in the community is in that age group. I'm in that age group, and I own my own business and still going strong. I have no plans to retire and I've lived in rural America for more than 30 years. And so that creating that entrepreneurship ecosystem and supporting entrepreneurs is the way that rural communities can kind of dig out of the recession, if you will.
I love that.
Yeah, boy, Frank, so just to let you know, you can volunteer for us anytime. Go to arp.org/IA. And it's interesting, you know, we talked about Jefferson earlier, and I just want to spotlight them again because I think they are doing exactly what Greg was talking about, or Frank, excuse me, what Frank was talking about, because they are creating that center for entrepreneurship in that co-working space. And it's people of all ages. And they're incentivizing people to come to Jefferson, of course, like I had mentioned, by offering that co-working space for free for anyone who moves there. But it's not just a co-working space. I mean, this is important because it's also making your community as livable as possible. So what are the other things that Jefferson is doing? Well, one of the things they've done that's really innovative is they've got rooftop art and a bell tower. And so they've become now a tourist destination of sorts because people walk up the bell tower in Jefferson and they look out and they see this amazing rooftop art on their town square that you would not see on the ground.
Yeah.
And it gets people talking. So people are now talking about Jefferson, and it's on people's radar screens in a way that it wasn't 6 or 7 years ago. And it really is a great example of how to embrace this new economy and attract people to your town.
I just want to add too, I think Frank raised a couple of really interesting points. One is also the issues associated with work and mentorship. And that ecosystem, as he described it, really is one where people with Frank with tons of experience and running businesses can help young folks figure out how to do that. And then we have all of these people in midlife and folks who are retired, but those folks don't necessarily just want to sit around and do nothing. They may want to work 15, 20 hours a week. So there really is a symbiotic relationship here that Frank described that you can see existing in rural communities that seems much more distant and much more maybe difficult to attain in larger urban centers. I thought Frank really raised a lot of interesting points. Get him as a volunteer. He seemed like a good guy.
People from Iowa raise interesting points.
Clearly.
That's all I'm saying.
Lots of good Iowa calls tonight, Brad.
Well, we're going to continue this conversation. Again, we have the phone lines open, 877-283-7570. One more cooler to give away. We're going to go back to the phone lines now, and we have Tammy Jo on the line with us out of Texas. Tammy Jo, go ahead.
Oh, howdy doody. Thank you so much. I'm in Fredericksburg, Texas, and we have an 18-year-old daughter, and we live on a farm out here. And we raise her for cattle, and our daughter loves, to help us out and band cattle and work with the cattle. But now she's going to go to college. She's a senior, and she's going to go to San Angelo and A&M, or out there in the A&M somewhere out in West Texas. She hasn't decided quite yet. However, when she graduates, how do you entice her to come back and help us on the farm? It's a rural community. We have a great peach crop. But what do the children do when they come back to the rural community? We have very hard housing situation here, but she can live here on the farm with us. But as an entrepreneur, how do you keep these young children to come back to the farm and help their next generation? This farm is a family-run farm, a German farm that's been settled in 1846, and we just want her to come and help us. But she's like, well, how do you do that?
I think there's a lot of folks that face that question. And Tammy, before you hang up on the line, I do want to let you know you are going to take home that last cooler here this evening. So congratulations on picking up the phone and making that call. We appreciate it. We'll get you connected with that cooler. And she brings up a good point. I think it's a question a lot of parents ask.
We're seeing, we're a very small state with farms that go back generations, mostly small family farms in Vermont. No, we don't have any big ag in Vermont, but a lot of small family farms. We get this question all the time. How do we entice our kids to come back? I think it's a very complicated question. I'm not sure if Brad has any ideas here, but I think it is about entrepreneurship. I think one of the things that we've seen in Vermont with family farms that have been successful is we've seen the next generation come back and take, traditional dairy farms and then looking to turn them into cheese making and other opportunities other than just sheer milk production. So it's about creating a greater entrepreneurial spirit, and for the generation ahead to be able to say to their children, might not have to do this the way that we did it, but we would love you to come back and continue the tradition of farming, and you may bring your own ideas to it. But this is a very complicated problem that I think we're seeing in a lot of places all across the country.
And it's also got to be tough because it's a great place to raise a family.
That's right.
So you really want your future offspring to have that opportunity.
That's right. It really is. And in part, one of the things that you can do is what we've been talking about all along is advocate to your elected officials to make that community a destination somehow for younger people. And there are various ways to do that, and we've obviously got a lot of ideas. But it's just she mentioned housing. I mean, rural housing right now is a very difficult issue. We got one community in Newton, Iowa, and they're offering $10,000 in cash to people who move to Newton and buy or build a house. And I don't know, they just started this, so I don't know if it's going to work or not, but it's an example of a community taking an issue that is like housing, that is very difficult, and kind of coming up with a creative idea and how to address it. But it's, this is happening across all towns across America right now.
Well, and the other side of it is that whenever you have those challenges, it's also hard to retain some folks that do move there, whether it's the doctors at the local hospital or nearby hospital, teachers. You've got to have those different opportunities to kind of bring them along. So it certainly has been a great conversation. As we wind things down, I know you guys always have some great final thoughts. You want to start, Greg?
Yeah, sure. One of the things we definitely want to talk to folks about tonight is what it's called, let me make sure I get this right, the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is a part of the roughly $65 billion program to improve access to high-quality, high-speed internet. This was a part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed Congress a number of months ago, and about $42.5 billion are being directed to bring high-quality, high-speed internet to underserved rural areas all across the country. In Vermont, for example, we're going to be using these dollars. We have 40% of the people in our state who are still on dial-up.
Okay, wow.
Okay. So if we want to be entrepreneurial, we want to do some of the things that Brad has been talking about tonight, that I've been talking about, some of the callers have been talking about, we have to provide high-speed internet to everybody. It's got to get to the last mile. And if there's anything that the pandemic has shown us is that high-speed internet is critical to prevent things like isolation, to be able to shop if you need to, and to be able to work. And I think in some of these small rural communities, once we get high-speed established, that creates a whole new opportunity because work has been turned upside down on its head, as Brad has said earlier, and people can go there, but they can't go there if they've got dial-up internet. They can't work.
You bring up a point that I wanted to ask you guys about earlier. talking about the AARP Community Challenge, talking about the Affordable Connectivity Program. These are grants. Somebody's got to fill out the paperwork and go through this process, whether it's applying through AARP or one of the government rural development programs. What's the best place to get started when it comes to filling out a grant and you haven't done it before?
Well, in the AARP grant programs, one of the things that we have no expectation of is that, that you're not a grant writer. We are less concerned about the writing than just following the format of the grant, which is pretty simple. We are interested in your ideas and what you think your ideas can do for your communities. And these aren't, the federal grants are a different story because they have to operate in a different way. But we are much more interested in your ideas than whether you have any grant writing experience.
I love that.
Right?
Well, if, for example, the the broadband program, that is a grant and it's federal. It's fairly simple, but if you were struggling at all, I would urge people to contact their local area agency on aging, their local AAA, because that is what they're there for, is to help you fill out some of the paperwork and get you what you need. And I will also say our Community Challenge grant is very easy to fill out. So don't be intimidated by that.
And designed that way.
It's designed that
We don't want
intentionally.
to, the goal here is not to turn people away with a 70-page grant application. It's to make it clean and easy and encourage people to do it.
I think I just heard a collective sigh.
Yeah, nobody wants to spend a lot of time
Nobody
writing
wants
grants.
to do that. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Well, Brad, you got some final thoughts for us here as well, too.
Well, I was just inspired by the callers, and we've got a lot of people out there who are very interested in their community and they want to do better. And so whether it is through the Community Challenge Grant Program or if they want to do advocacy on, and the nice thing about AARP is we do advocacy at the federal, state, and local level. We're one of the few organizations that do advocacy on all three levels. And so if that is your passion, I'm going to just say contact AARP, because a lot of times we're probably one of the larger organizations in your community, and so you're going to have others around you that are also interested in advocacy, and you'd be amazed at what you can get done just by a few voices who are passionate about something.
Now, you said you guys are going to announce the next round of winners for the Community Challenge grant here at the end of the month. Was that right?
June 29th, correct.
So what is the process from beginning to end? I mean, how often do you guys give these grants away? What are we looking at here?
They're released in February, right?
Yeah,
so you can start applying in February, and then you've got until April?
I think that's right, early April.
Early April to fill it out, and then we announce the grants at the end of June. So look out on February for when that grant announcement comes and get it filled out. And for example, if you're a person and you want some pickleball courts, but you need some help, well, maybe if the pickleball, like in Keokuk, it was the public library that filled out the grant because the tennis courts were next to the public library.
That works
and
well.
so it became a project of theirs. So if you need help, they're in small towns. I mean, small towns. You're going to find someone who's able to help you out.
All the time.
Even turning to the local school district, because there's somebody there that has some ideas as well too. Especially whenever you're talking about wanting to have something to keep kids entertained, your local teachers probably have some ideas, or maybe you are a teacher or educator in the community. You might have some ideas. So, gentlemen, it has been a pleasure. It's nice to have you. I haven't had Brad on with me before, so Brad, pleasure to meet you.
Oh, it's great meeting you, Janet. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. Again, they have been taking the time here to talk about this evening and helping our local communities take off for the next generation that we need to make happen. That about does it here for tonight. AARP will be back with us on July 21st. That's with their 99 Ways to Save. And of course, we will see you then. Good night.